All right. Remarkable story coming up today with Command Master Chief Brown, abbreviated CMC for those that don't know, before his name and whatever he does in the Navy, CMC Brown. So used to be a Senior Chief Brown when I knew him back in the day. Good mentor to me. He was one of my Naval Academy Senior Enlisted Leaders. He was the Senior Enlisted Leader that I had there. For those that don't know, the Naval Academy is divided into 30 companies. And Senior Brown was my 21st company senior enlisted guy. He also encouraged me to take on the 21st company student company commander role in the back half of my senior year, which originally I had no interest in. So on we grow. Today, CMC Brown serves as the Command Senior Enlisted Leader for the Navy Hospital in Naples, Italy. His journey spans a gamut of 13 different billets or jobs. He deployed 7 times to the Pacific, Atlantic, Middle East. Raised in the sunny streets of Redlands, California, and graduated from Redlands High School to the vast expanses of the oceans today in the Navy. From early life, bit of an entrepreneur, ran a paper route at the age of 11. That was pretty cool. Selling papers, mowing lawns, pulling weeds, car washing, just getting out there and doing the work. Got a bachelor's degree in business and leadership and management from Florida State College in Jacksonville. Hobbies, woodworking, photography, running, writing, working out. He's committed to his community, and his faith is evident in his leadership of a men's Bible study and his work with a local immigration shelter and involvement in the local church. A little bit of what we'll get into today is truth throughout his life. He's grappled with the complexities of truth, understanding the power that both bind and free. So can't wait to hit more of your life experience today, but jumping into memory section. So here we go. The first 2 were from people 1 class behind me at the academy. The next 3 were in my class in 21st Company. So for the listeners, that 30 companies thing, that was the breakdown there. First one, Jason Morin. He's a class behind me. He was a Mustang, so enlisted to officer type of program. Was enlisted prior to coming to the Naval Academy, graduated. You probably had a lot to do with that for him. So he said, Senior Chief Brown was good at relating to the midshipmen. Value that stood out to him was obviously it was leadership. He made sure that we were on the path to the next level. A lot of people say it, but not a whole lot do it. And that's something that stood out to him from you. You acted in a capacity without a company officer, and during the death of a classmate of his, he was able to get you were able to get his final exams moved and pushed out because of that event. Seeing that he wasn't an academic genius there is what he said. So I think he thinks that it helped him prepare better to pass that exam. So he also said, you're a bit of a hard ass on us sometimes, but I think we needed it looking back. All right, next one, Joe Carroll. He said, I have nothing but fond memories of Senior Chief Brown, smart, mature, empathetic, and selfless. He's a great first example for a bunch of us soon-to-be officers of what a good senior enlisted person looks like. Guidance counselor almost. I genuinely remember being a second lieutenant, getting into my first platoon, thinking back on the academy days, preparing, appreciating him even more. So another thing that sticks out at the end of his first year, of my first year, sorry, Joe was approaching his senior year that time. He took a few of you out on a run around the yard, kind of a collective company commander interview. So backfilling what I was holding at the time. I think Joe ended up landed that one, right? Wasn't he? Yeah.
I think he did, yeah.
That's cool. And the whole time on that run, he was like grilling the candidates about the company, what 21st was doing well, where can we improve, what we could do better, what could the midshipman leadership do better, etc. The point was made. It wasn't about us. It was about making the unit better. And peer leadership is tough. That's something that he said that, you help coach all of those guys through, but him specifically. And he truly appreciated the positive impact that he had on his career in life. So, and right now I'm going to try a new thing I've never done before. I'm going to share my screen and show a photo of that class.
Oh.
So here we go. There we are, Senior Chief Brown.
I remember.
Always under, right?
Yeah,
with that,
I remember that
2011 group. So that's pretty neat. Joe shared that with me. All right, so those were the young ones. Next three from my class: Baird, Nunn, Roberts, my roommate. Impression of him was always really high, well-spoken, reasonable leader. His guidance and decisions always made sense. Next one, Garrett Ulfstad. Awesome dude. Memory. I think we had a dining out at Buddy's or someplace first year towards the end of the night. He sent all the underclass back to the hall for curfew or whatever. And as he was doing that, he took their unfinished beer pitchers and brought them over to the firsty table, which was great.
I remember that.
Awesome. Value. He always held us to the highest standards while also remaining relatable and approachable. Another good one. I think that's a hard balance to strike as a leader, but he did it with authenticity. Looking back on it, he's a guy you hoped you get paired with as a young new JO, junior officer. Hope he and his family are doing well. Last one, James Long. He's a bit of a goofball back in the day, but I think he became a Navy SEAL. He said, thinking back on our time at the Academy, there are a few leaders that stand out. Senior Chief Brown was one of them. I affectionately remember him, that he stands out in my mind as a prime example of servant leadership. As I recall, we were first introduced to Senior, as he allowed us to call him during the time, when it was our chance to serve in leadership roles in 21st Company. I'll never forget, he set the bar for us, set the example. It seemed like he was always around to be there for us, not to bark orders or administer protocols, but to mentor, encourage, and invest in us and the future of the Navy. He was there at formation. He was there when we got our service selection, smile on his face to share the joy. He was there in King Hall during breakfast, noon and night. He was there in Midland, Texas, after we lost a peer, Patrick Whalen. One of the examples of leadership we witnessed at Naval Academy, Senior Chief Brown, is one that I will never forget. Last one, he said, pretty sure he was also there when talking about me, when you manhandled a second class guy when we were sophomores. The dude was stealing money from folks throughout the entire company. And I kind of put him up against the wall. I said, stop it, stop. But he said, not sure that I would have been able to administer some Lone Star justice had we had a different, more politically focused senior enlisted advisor.
I know there was a lot of different types of justice that went on in the hall. I'm not naive, or at least I've heard after the fact.
Yeah. Good stuff. That's the memory section. So it's story time. Command Master Chief Brown, lay it on us.
What do you want to hear?
From the beginning. I want to hear, hey, where'd you come from? How'd you grow up?
Oh, man. When I think about it, you kind of hit it on the head, paper out at the age of 11, which seems kind of unheard of now. I couldn't imagine my 11-year-old getting up in the morning, and
all the other parents would be looking at you funny, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I used to get up and fold papers and get on a bicycle, and it was barely light outside, and I'd be riding a route, throwing papers before school. This is like middle school. So I think that kind of just, I don't know, that just kind of really sums me up. I was always looking to not be satisfied with my situation, because we did come from a very humble beginnings, and I want to be careful not to really bash my parents, or it's not. I try not to do that. But they make decisions in your life, and I tell everybody when I talk about these kind of things, there's circumstances and consequences, and circumstances are things that you don't control. It's things that just kind of happen to you. The cards you're dealt. And my circumstance was I was one of 3 boys raised by a single mom, and we all have different fathers, and none of us knew our dads. And so with that as challenges, but I guess I just never really wanted to accept that, I guess. I would kind of look at my surroundings and think, what can I do differently? How can I get a pair of shoes? Or how can I get a pair of pants that I want? Or how can I get a bicycle? And when I look back, there were good years. There was like peaks and valleys. There were good years and there were bad years. And I always love to tell my kids, because I have 4 kids. I love to tell my kids a story about the Christmas that we didn't get anything, no presents, and there were tough years like that too. And so I always looked for ways to, just to try to do something and try to. So yeah, everything from wash cars to deliver papers to mowing grass to picking weeds, whatever I can do to land a dollar. And half the time I probably blew it, and then the other half if I was set on a goal, I would, like a bike or whatever, I would aim towards that goal and get it. But that was pretty much me from a young kid, man. And then and then as I got older, and really through my adolescent years, there's one thing that my family did really the right thing. Well, there's 2 things they did. I think they did really well. There's probably more actually, but 2 things that stick out was they put us in church, and that we would go to church as a young family. And I think there is where I really got influenced by a lot of good people, a lot of good men, a lot of good women, and it had a really hand in my life to kind of guide me and mentor me outside of my family unit, and always gave me something to aspire to, look up to. And it's where I came to faith and came into belief in God and who He was, and was just really, really drawn to who God was at a young age. And then, they had me going to camp, and the camp experiences, and what happened to you? There you go. There was the camp experiences and all that growing up, so that was pivotal in my youth, in my young age. But unfortunately, as I got older, my family situation kind of eroded and imploded, and so as my mom and I had a stepdad at the time, they kind of went separate ways. Things just kind of fell apart in our home, and anybody that's gone through divorce as a kid can knows what I'm talking about. The yelling, the screaming, waking up in the middle of the night. And I was the middle kid of the 3 brothers, so I kind of was like trying to hold everything together, and but after a while it wears on you and you get tired of it, and then at some point you just look for a way out, and that's kind of where I got to in my young adult life, young life. I was like, how can I get out of the situation?
What age were you around that time?
I think I was around 16.
Okay.
I was
so
just
almost,
like, I'm ready.
Almost at a graduation type of years.
So yeah, I was pretty fortunate. I started early, and so which meant I could finish early, and
started early in the Navy.
No, well, yes, but I started early in school, so I could finish school early.
Got it.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, all my kids are like that too.
Yeah. So, and then as I got older, one, kind of stepping back a little bit, one thing I did have when I was really young was my grandfather. And I would say he was a huge influence in my life about joining the military. He was a World War II veteran, served in Papua New Guinea in the Army, was wounded in battle, and eventually was discharged after that. If you know in the history about Papua New Guinea, we got our butts kicked by the Japanese. But he got wounded there, and discharge out of there. But I just remember the stories as a small kid. He would always talk to me about the war, and he still had his bayonet, his rifle, and all kinds of stuff. And so I always remember those stories, and he really inspired me to serve. So as I got older and I was looking for a way out, that just seemed like the obvious choice for me. And school, I wasn't very disciplined in school at the time. Just didn't have a lot of focus, and so I convinced my mom to sign me over, and she agreed, and she signed me over to the Navy, and I left for boot camp at the age of 17, and I'm still here. 29 years, almost 29 years later, I'm still here.
That's crazy.
So that's the short version of kind of why I joined the military.
Gotcha. So then you get in, you do the boot camp thing, and first job. So your MOS coming out was what, damage control, or what was?
Yeah. So I actually joined the Navy to be a Navy corpsman. That's what I wanted to do really bad. But when you get to the place, it's called MEPS, where they process you, do the physicals, all the checks they do. You go to like it's called billeting, and they offer you jobs. And so when it came to the time where I was like, hey, I want to be a Navy corpsman, they were like, yeah, we don't have that available. You got to pick one of these 10 choices. That's what they tell you. That's what they make you believe. But when you're 17, you just take whatever they say. Oh, yeah, exactly. So I call that the MEPS two-step. And so they led me in the dance, and I signed up for the thing that sounded the coolest, and I took the job. But it worked out. It worked out okay. And I became a damage controlman, which is like an engineer on the ship with a little edge of firefighting, basically. So that's what I did. I was a ship guy for most of my career.
Got it.
Yeah.
And as you climb the ranks and you kind of change jobs, and you get really a diverse type of perspective on everything. But back when you were damage control, any fun things out of that stick out to you? Like, I mean, I really enjoyed this, or anything?
When you're young, especially when you're like 18, 19, and I know anybody can attest to this, you just do stupid stuff. And back in those days in the 90s, the ships were manned with all men. And so a bunch of men that are young just do dumb stuff, And so there's a lot of fond memories of port calls and just running the town, or, working late at night and just goofing off as guys or beating each other up. Young men have a lot of energy, and sometimes that energy comes out in lots of ways. And and we definitely weren't definitely avoiding that, essentially. So we definitely would look for lots of ways to get that energy out, which was wrestling, or we called it Royal Rumble. That's what we used to call that back in those days. Yeah. And
would you do that like in the birthing area, or what?
Oh man, yeah, there were Royal Rumbles all over the place.
Gotcha.
But that's what young guys do. They look to beat each other to you can't take it anymore, but then you're best friends after, but yeah, good times.
Good stuff. In your younger years, any key turning points in your life that stand out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Not necessarily a positive. So
turning points typically aren't, but sometimes I guess they can be.
So when I was about 2 years in my first enlistment, I was on a ship. We were deployed, and we did what's called a swim call. So a swim call is when the ship's out in the ocean. It stops everything it's doing, locks the screws. You stop pumping sewage, which is, you don't want to swim in sewage. All those things you do so that way you're generally in a beautiful place, right? Clear waters or some just exotic place. And we did a swim call in the Indian Ocean. I think we were off the coast of somewhere in Africa, I think at the time. And so we did a swim call, and I think I was 19 at the time, and we were doing all young men trying to outdo each other, trying to one up each other with some flip or whatever the case may be. And so on the ship, we were jumping off the back, which is called the fantail, and it's about a 20-foot drop. And there's this thing called a screw guard, which is a metal rail that protrudes out from the ship, and what it does is it protects the ship from the tugboats hitting the screws. It's a screw guard. So they tried their best to say, hey, nobody jump right here, and they taped it off. But after a while, you know, I guess we kind of forget, and you know. And
did some diagonal jumping that day, maybe?
Oh yeah. So anyway, long story short, I had a bad accident, and it was preceded by, hey, watch this, guys. In my mind, I saw myself running. I was going to jump into a handstand and catapult myself off into a flip dive 20 feet down. That's how it was in my mind.
Yep.
And what happened was I didn't let go. I guess gravity kicked in, maybe the inertia kicked in. My body went all the way around. And once I hit the ship, because I went all the way around, hit the ship, and I went straight down. And unfortunately, it was above that guard. And so my knee hit it first, and then my abdomen hit it. And let's just say I never hit the water. And I'm just...
Ouch.
Yeah, ouch. Ouch is very... Yeah, there's a picture out there somewhere, and would you know it, every once in a while I run into somebody, and that's the first thing they tell me. I kid you not. Happened a couple years ago. I ran into a guy who was a gunner's mate who went crossed over to the officer side. He's a commander, actually still in. And first thing out of his mouth is, "Man, I remember when you hit the screw guard." I was like, "You gotta be kidding me, man! It's like 28 years ago, man."
There's a few things that'll follow you around forever. I guess that's one of them.
That's one of them. So I got taken off the ship. I got medevaced off the ship and began a journey back to the States through Africa, in Italy. And I spent a good couple years on a limited duty status. And basically my whole life came to a screeching halt, reset my life. And because I was really kind of heading down the wrong path. I was hanging out with the wrong people, doing the wrong things, getting involved with the wrong kind of things and stuff, and trying to hang out with the cool kids, you know, and really, you know, stepping away from my faith, and you know, it was just not good. And so it's funny when I look back, it's almost like a grand reset that's pulling the strings and said, nope, this is not the direction you're going to go. And by the way, you're gonna be put on hold for a couple years and figure some things out. So that was pretty pivotal early in my career and my life.
Gotcha. Do you have any mentors through that event?
Let's see. Not good mentors.
Well, I mean, maybe on the rebound, like when you came back.
Yeah, no. You know, there were a lot of good mentors at the time. You know, that's one thing I've been really good about doing. You know, somebody once asked me, like, how is it that I've done so well in life coming from circumstances that I came from? And I just, and when I think about it, and the answer I ended up giving the individual was, actually the question was, how did you end up the way you did without a father? And I said, it's because I had many fathers in my life. And so I've always been good about looking for father figures in different places and different points in my life. So yeah, I've always found either with a guy named Jack was an old Vietnam veteran that was still kind of hanging around in that same time frame, took me under his wing. And Jack was a little crazy, a little off the kilter, one of those old Vietnam Agent Orange guys. And he took me under his wing and made me a locksmith of all things. And I spent a lot of time with that guy and listening to his stories, got pretty close with him, and taught me the trade of locksmithing, and really the next 2 years I just spent a lot of time with that guy. I actually don't even know where he's at now. But yeah. Yeah,
Gotcha.
he's one that sticks out. Good old Jack.
Cool. Um, favorite command? You've been to a lot of places, 13 different places. Did you ever have like a killer team, best team you were a part of, favorite type of deal there? I know you're in one, but like across the full spectrum.
Every situation is different. There's good parts of every. I would say most memorable group or team that is fun, and I still talk to a lot of those guys, is the first crew, the first ship.
Awesome.
Those group of guys. I mean, some of those guys are actually none of those guys are in the military anymore. I'm the only one, and but I either see them or I talk to them. I share text messages or phone calls or whatever the case may be. That's the most memorable, and I think we bonded the most. That group of guys, we deployed together. We worked late together. I hate to say the word bled together. We didn't bleed together, but you just really bonded. We sealed it in for life. That's the most memorable group. That first ship. So
cool.
But if I'm being selfish, for me the most cherished and hands down, and I tell people all the time when they come in the office, because it's the Naval Academy. Like what a really cool opportunity to go there. I really had no business being there, but someone gave me a shot, gave me a chance, and what a special place. And talk to guys like you still, 15, 12 years later, and still running to guys. My last command, I had one of the midshipmen from my last command was a department head, and
Cool.
Seeing him all grown up with 3 boys, and watching him still do the same stuff he did 12 years before that, and I still run into him. Actually, there's one guy here from that time, Chris
Awesome.
Rowland. I don't know if you remember Chris Rowland.
Maybe
I think he's a 10 grad. Yeah, he's here, and so it's just they're everywhere, and it's so cool to run into these guys and girls, see them all grown up, and listen to their stories about kids and career, and it's just really neat to know that, man, I had just a small part of that, at some point in their line. It's like, man. So that's definitely cherished for me personally. I mean, things like, hey, part of my job is going to the football game. Marching through town alongside the midshipmen. And one of the coolest things I got to do was every once in a while, a parent would come to town, and I'd say, hey, why don't you come march with us? And I'd have them march alongside with me. And they just thought I was the coolest thing, just to march alongside the company. And I would say, yeah, just stay with me. Don't worry about it, that's just so cool, so neat.
Nice. Being part of the community.
Yeah, watching you guys play in the field. Every once in a while, I get a chance to go on the field. That was kind of cool. Or just being in the stands with Joe Schmo midshipmen, then watching them just put everybody energy into the game. And my memories, like, when we almost came back and beat Notre Dame in Baltimore that one year, that was just so much excitement. It started raining, I think, and just watching that place come unglued. I think everybody was leaving. Like the stadium emptied out, and it was just the midshipmen and a few of us. And you guys made a run, started coming back, and it was like touchdown, get the ball back, touchdown, and it started like getting closer and closer. I think that was Notre Dame, and we lost, but it was just that place just came unglued, especially when the rain came down. Oh my gosh, it was just neat. It's just neat to sit there and watch. It's like, wow, like that is so cool. Man, I mean, there's just so many stories, so many touch points where they trust you, they rely on you. I can probably count on one hand the amount of fathers that passed away during that time, and I'm the first one they call, and you stop everything you're doing, and you go there, you go there where they are, and you just hug them,
Yep.
There's some memories like that, and those are tough, and
No doubt.
or yeah, like watching a company, the whole brigade kind of rally around what happened with um, uh, that young lady, Kirsten Dickman, I believe.
Yep.
Just watching that kind of unfold, and yeah, that was. I mean, I can keep going, man. There's so many stories. I just feel blessed that I got to be there and be a part of it, and it's almost like I was along for the ride,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
It was pretty cool.
definitely feel the same way. Deployment story. Any standout deployment stories?
Yeah.
I'm sure
Hands
you got
down.
many of them.
Oh my gosh. No, that's easy. COVID, man. Oh my
COVID.
gosh.
I was like, it was down my list, but I saw that 11 months on. Was it a carrier
Yeah.
or too
Yeah.
young?
So, gosh, man, I still got issues from that. Oh my gosh. But I mean, we were supposed to deploy in summer of 2020. That was the plan, right? But then this thing called pandemic kind of unfolded before everyone's eyes, right? The whole world. And really the turn of 19 to 20, and we were doing our workups in like Nevada and off the coast of California. There's a little island called San Clemente. We're doing all of our little workups to prepare, and we're just kind of seeing it. It's like a drum beat, and the beat gets louder and louder, and
Jumanji.
yeah, no, yeah, like that, or I think I heard it somewhere else. Maybe it was on a podcast. Or maybe said someone. It's like Lord of the Rings when the enemies come in, the drums are beating and stuff. That's kind of what it felt like, and it just seemed like once the government and the military put the gauntlet down and said, "Hey, nope, we're going to go to this crisis mode for not spreading this unknown thing." That meant that our life got very difficult and very hard, and what we did 1,000 times before, what I've done 7 times before, it just everything got thrown out the window, and literally from day to day, it was what's changed, what's hour to hour sometimes. What do we have to do now? And what happened was we in an effort to try to contain the spread of this stuff, they started implementing all these policies of isolating and sequestering and quarantining, which the truth is, it's nothing new. It's something that we've done many times in our history. I mean, you can even read the Bible, and some of the things that we did during COVID is actually in the Bible too, which is interesting. But it's we just had to on the fly, the command leadership, and I'm part of that as a command master chief. I'm part of the command leadership. You get the orders from on up high, and it doesn't make any sense, and you sift through the plethora of policy that's coming out literally every day, and you try to sift through all that as a command lead, and you've got 330 people waiting for your next order. And then, oh, by the way, you're trying to get all those people and that equipment and that aircraft on board a aircraft carrier to deploy overseas. And so it just got super hard. And nobody knew.
You have me think back to those days too, because a smaller scope, but when I ran a plant, I had to do the exact same things. Come out every day. All right, someone's positive. Follow all these things is like always on.
Yeah. Gosh, man. I mean, sometimes it felt like we were in a movie. I remember we had to test the whole air wing, which is about 1,800 people, had a test before we even got on board a ship, because you got to think back. At the same time, there was something else going on in the news with another ship in Guam. I think it was the Theodore Roosevelt, and they had their own challenge that kind of unfold, and they were kind of like the guinea pig of what to do, how to control it, and it kind of really spread pretty bad. And if you remember, recall, an actual sailor died on the ship from COVID or from the effects of COVID, and so it got real serious, right? And that I think that really struck a chord through the Navy that, hey, this is something we need to take serious, especially what happened on that ship and how quickly it spread. I mean, if you think about it, you get 5,000 people on a ship, it's very difficult to manage, right? Stuff is everywhere.
No doubt.
Right?
Inside of a big shoebox.
Absolutely.
Floating on the water. Yeah.
Yep. It's just everywhere. So, so we had a test, and we literally had to plan out to the finest detail how we're going to get 300 people from a hotel on base into 17 different vans to a hangar in cohorts without them crossing each other, and then slowly into a process in an aircraft hangar with corpsmen waiting that are in like hazmat suits from a movie, like they're walking into a radioactive site.
Was that movie Outbreak? I think I watched Outbreak during the pandemic just because
that's what it looked like. So we felt like we were in a movie. Like, what is going on here? And we had to do that 2 times before we got on board the ship. Everybody in the air wing had to do that. And then once we got the all clear, even to get on board the ship when the ship came, because the ship came down from Washington, and then we had to embark the ship, and they quarantined off part of the base, and they only brought in. It was just madness. I've never seen anything like that in my career.
And your role in that was what?
My role was
at the time
was as a command master chief. So my role was to support the command leadership, command team, ensure that the senior enlisted and all the enlisted are carrying out the orders that are literally the last order. We're going to follow the last order, right?
Yeah.
And it's everything from.
You were flooded. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's basic things like, and this is like, we're impacting families too. So it's basic things like a good example at the time was, okay, everybody, the plan is we're going to all go home for 10 days, and they're going to stay at home. So buy food to stay in your house for 10 days. I'm making this up. This is what the plan was.
Yeah. And go home and stay in your house for 10 days.
Right? And that, to everybody, that was a great plan. Morale is high. Let's go home for 10 days and spend quality time with our family. So we implemented the plan. And I think we got about 2 or 3 days into it, and plan changed. And said, nope, we're going to move and a lot of it was driven by money, right? So as you know, in the military, it's a lot of bureaucracy. And so a lot of times money drives a lot of things. So the plan came through, the money came through. We're going to move everybody on base, and we're going to quarantine everybody in a hotel on base. So 3 or 4 days into it, I had some families quit their jobs because we were asking them to quarantine their family. So some people quit their jobs to do that. Some people stocked up on $1,000 worth of food and to really hunker down. And then within a few days, we had to be the unfortunate bearer of bad news. Like, hey, change all that. Everybody say goodbye to your families and lay out the dates. Hey, the first wave, you're going to come on, check in on this day, the next wave, next wave, next wave. And just trying to manage that and the flood of questions that you don't have answers for. The angry families, the hurting families, the crying families, it was hard, man. I had never done anything hard like that in my entire career. And then the next step is, hey, okay, we're all on base. Now you can no longer have your car. So they had to give the cars away. So they had to rely completely on, we had cohorts of vans to get them methodically from point A to point B so that we could prepare and maintain a bubble, which, when you don't know what you're dealing with and you're trying to maintain the integrity of the crew that you need to get on board the ship, because, oh, by the way, at the same time, ships were pulling it apart because they couldn't keep COVID off ships, and so which extremely inhibits the Navy from deploying a force to to do our nation's business. Right? That's what it boils down to. One of the greatest things about what we do is, we deploy all over the world, and and that's part of our diplomacy is having forces on the ready. And if we can't do that because of COVID, that's a problem. So at the time, I believe we had a couple strike groups that were out for a long time, and they were kind of being held over. The Truman was kind of unfolding at the time, and all this was open forum. It was blowing up the media.
Yeah.
So we were just like, hey, our charge was, hey guys, let's do this. Let's relieve those guys that are trying to get home to their families that have been gone for. I think the time one of the strike groups was out for 10 months, and they got extended and extended and extended. So I think one strike group was sitting off the coast of Virginia for like a month, just staring at the coast. But
like a lot of shipping containers were at the time.
Yeah, and those are the right decisions. If you think about it, you got to have a strike group ready to go, and they're contained off the coast, and there's no COVID, so you keep them there. So it was like, hey, make sure we're healthy. Let's get out there. So to make that happen, to maintain that quarantine, that bubble, that was the hardest thing I ever did, man. It was so hard.
It's probably, and it's one of my biggest change management teachers for sure. It sounds like it is for you as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I think someone, my CEO said it best. It's like I gave everything I had in the tank before the start of the deployment, and I still had to deploy for 11 months or whatever. It was just, it was so taxing. It was very taxing.
No doubt. All right, let's liven it up a little bit. What are your critical key habits to success? What do you fall back on? What are your, when the stuff's going down?
A good habit I picked up about 10 years ago was writing, journaling. I'm a big writer.
When's the book coming out? I'll buy it.
Man, some of that stuff you don't want to get published, man.
Well, that's the good stuff.
Oh my gosh, man! I told my wife, babe, you might not want to read some of that stuff. I've kept everyone, and I've got, I'm on my 10th volume, and so I picked that habit up, really at a necessity because at the time I was really going through a difficult time in my life, and so just I went, I was doing what I was supposed to do, going to counseling, getting help, getting some advice, reaching out to mentors, and that's one of the things that was consistent was, hey, journal. And I remember the first time it was posed to me by one of the guys I looked up to, was like, hey, have you journaled? And I think I laughed out loud, and because I was like, why do I want to keep a diary? That's stupid, and that's for girls. I'm going to write a diary. But I didn't really understand the value of it at the time. But then I slowly picked it up. It would be like a sentence on this day, and then maybe a couple weeks later, maybe another sentence. And that was like in 2012 was when I first kind of hobbled into it. 13 got a little bit better, and then 2014 is when the light bulb really went off on my brain, and I realized, because I didn't buy a journal for the new year. And I had already gone, I think it was February of 14, and I felt like something was missing. And I knew what it was. I wasn't writing. And so from that point on, I've been pretty devout every day.
Awesome.
Man, I can't think of a day. I couldn't imagine a day without it, to be honest. Just it helps me process.
I kind of started doing that too. I got these full focus planners that I use, and it used to be all very task oriented every day. And then it became like a sentence, and then it became a couple sentences. And then it was like, oh, I might want to come back to this one day. And there was a sentence and a highlight. So like I can read some quick, with this whole AI thing, maybe one day you could take your journals and scan them in. It writes the book for you, and then you go back and cut it out. But
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, man. But there's so much. Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I've said there's so much good stuff that comes out that I've read about just the the neuroscience behind writing with pen and paper, because I like to do it old school, pen and paper.
Yeah.
And less distractions. It actually engages your brain, and then this guy up here, the PFC, right, the prefrontal cortex. That's the braking system.
That's the first time I heard that. I like it.
Yeah, the PFC, man. The best thing I heard is, imagine a Ferrari with brakes, or a Ferrari with no brakes. That's kind of our brains. It's like a Ferrari, but when we're young, like 18, 19,
no brakes.
There's no brakes, and so what journaling does is it really, really, really helps engage that and gets that thing going. So
awesome. Other than journaling and writing, any other key habits that to your success?
Avid reader. I love to read. I read my Bible. I love to read my Bible. I'm a Christian. I call myself a Christian, and that means I should know what that means. I know what it means who Christ is, and so I read my Bible, man. I read my Bible. I follow a good plan. Actually, it's kind of cool. There's a couple guys that follow the same plans and throughout the world, and we catch up with each other and bounce questions off each other. It's kind of neat that I know there's a couple guys out there doing it with me, and
awesome.
And there's so much rich knowledge and wisdom, and it's just I feel like I'll be reading my Bible my entire life. There's just so much in there, man.
Yeah, I definitely got some catching up to do there. So, sounds like a good circle to be a part of with that group. Let's see. All right. If you could go back and tell your younger self to do something different, what would you say?
Oh, man. Don't quit. Don't give up. It's funny, like, I remember in high school, I had a focus issue, discipline issue. I didn't have a strong hand in my life at that time. And one of those things was school, academics, and, the classic, well, I love history, I love geography, I love, so I'm good at that stuff, but I don't like math. So, you know what?
Yeah.
You tell yourself, I'm not good at math. So you fell out of algebra 2, you fell out of geometry, and then you just tell yourself, I'm just not good at it. It's just not in my genes. Yeah. But the truth is, I just didn't know how to work hard, or I quit. And I didn't do the homework. I didn't put the effort into it. And, so the first time you fail, at least the first time I failed, that kind of gets into your psyche, kind of gets into your DNA. And I've learned in life it does something to you, man. It really, really does something to you. Sometimes there are some things that can take you a long time to get it out. And for me, I would have told myself, hey, man, don't quit. Don't give up. You're smart. You're not stupid. You can do this. You just got to work harder. It's worth it. Because, going back to the story of the Naval Academy, I remember the first time I walked on campus when I first got there, and I walked around, I'm like, just blown away. And I thought, I was kind of a little mad, actually. I was was like, why didn't anybody tell me about this place? And I was like, I never knew this existed.
Me neither. In high school, I just, luck of the draw.
Yeah, I guess so. So, but obviously, I would have had to work really hard. I would have had to take academics serious. I would have had to apply myself and be competitive against a lot of applicants. But I didn't have that type of focus or discipline at that age, man. And so I would go back and say, hey, man, put the work in. Don't give up. Don't quit. Don't be afraid. Because that's what it boils down to. It's that, you let that fear set in, and then you lie to yourself, man. You tell yourself all sorts of lies, and you believe them, and that affects so much, man.
Yep. I was looking through. It's funny you bring that up. I was looking through my transcript the other day, to see what was my actual GPA, because I don't remember exactly what it was. I wrote it down. I think, yeah, it was a 2.35. But yeah, and most of the good grades came about in junior and senior year. It wasn't early. Earlier on, it was like barely toeing the line. I even had a semester, it was like 1 point something. I think second semester plebe year. And, chemistry wasn't great. But all the ones that I liked, all the classes I liked were pretty good.
Yeah.
So it's funny you mentioned that.
Yeah, no, man, it's gosh, man, it's funny for me. Actually, I always knew I wanted to go to college, especially as I got older, and it took me 10 years to get a associate's degree in the Navy, and that was like old school before the internet. I would go to classes on base and things like that, and I banged out most of my classes. I think it was like 20 classes. I banged out 18 of them in like a year and a half. Just full-time job, family, going to school, that type of thing. And then I got to math, which I put off toward the end. Right. So fast forward 10 years after failing algebra two times in high school because I lied to myself, and so I procrastinated so much. I put it off to the end, and it was like I knew it was kind of looming there, and then I still kind of bought into the lie. And then the worst thing, I just walked away from it. I walked away from my associate's degree, and I told myself, well, I'm going back to sea. I got to focus on the operational. I got to focus on my job. I got to focus. You lie to yourself. But the truth is,
Yeah.
you're afraid. I didn't want to fail. I didn't want to have to face, paying back money, or I didn't want to face, my family or my friends and tell them I failed, because the last time I took these classes, I failed, 10 years prior. And, but it wasn't until, my wife really just kind of came alongside me, encouraged me. And actually she went to like a preparatory class with me. That's one thing she took a college algebra preparatory class with me, alongside with me. And then,
Awesome.
And then I finally mustered the courage and went to after hours college algebra class in 2013. So 10 years, maybe 11 years when I started my associates, so 11 years later, I'm finally in college algebra, and I put the effort in, I put the work in, I do the work, and I get an A. And It's like, what the heck? I actually like this stuff. And I get an associate's. Cool. Yeah. And then I get my bachelor's later, and then I'm taking statistics, and I'm taking college level accounting, and it's all math, and I'm actually good at this stuff. But you lie to yourself, and you tell yourself these lies, and you believe it. I just didn't put the work in. I didn't put the effort in. I was a coward. And so I would go back and say, hey man, don't be a coward.
Yeah.
Tough up. Don't quit.
That's a good story to help others with. Like I'm sure you have a million times, or you have a million stories to relate and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. That was good. Okay. Self-awareness. How do you reflect? How do you remain self-aware? How do you make sure that you're on the right course?
Well, there's two ways. First way is my wife. She lets me know.
Yep.
She is, she's closest to me, and she's seen me at my worst. She's seen me at my best. She sees my shortfalls. I come up short. I just came up short yesterday, and yeah. So she lets me know, and because we've got that good bond, and I love her, and I want to do right by her and my family, and it hits close to home, and it makes me examine myself, really, like, okay, what am I not doing? That's one way. Another way is, just through my journaling. That's very helpful.
Gotcha. Figured you'd say that.
Yeah, my Bible reading is very helpful. It's a good way of searing straight to your heart and convicting you. And then, I like to surround myself with a lot of good people, man, good guys. And one of the things that you mentioned is I lead a Bible study. Everywhere I've gone, and I would say in the last 10 years, I managed to surround myself with good men. And I always tell people, if you want to be a better man, you surround yourself with better men. It's very simple. And so I surround myself with good men that are better than me. And we come up with some routine of we meet, we eat, we share, we read, we laugh together. We do it on a regular. Like, so that's always helpful, right? So whenever and I always find myself leading these groups for some reason, which is funny, which I always find really, really funny, is I'm the most unqualified guy. But I find myself always leading these things, and that's just funny how life works sometimes. But I guess to my point, to your question is, I've learned when you pour yourself into other people, you allow people to be poured into you, if that makes any sense. So that's very helpful. It's very helpful to me to always pour into other people. My wife says it really good. She says, making sure your life is outward focused, not always inward focused, and that's kind of what she's talking about, is when you make a good part of your life about other people, it really opens it up to people to pour into you, really.
Gotcha.
So that's another way.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Really random question here. You ever run into a guy named Jervy Alota in the fleet?
Sure. No.
Yeah, he's a captain of a ship. Okay, he's a Navy football. He's a previous guest, but you've been around a while. I figured I'd ask.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
I don't think y'all are any similar ships, but
Yeah.
Gotcha. Let's see. Biggest struggle that you're working through today?
Well, I think you alluded to it. We talked about it. An email is truth, man. Truth. What is truth, right? That's the age-old question. It's been asked for thousands of years. What is truth, right? But when I look at my life in retrospect, in different parts of my life, even today as a professional, as a family man, as a husband, man, sometimes it's hard, man. It's hard to face the truth. And whether it's a little white lie or it's a big fat, cheat, it's all about truth, right? It's all about, good and bad, light and dark, for me, it's one thing that I feel like God's been working in my life over the last 10 years. It's just facing truth. And it could be even something simple as, hey, just being honest with my wife, even a basic example of where I was terrible at. And this is like a small example. Telling my wife I want to be home at 5:00, which is a lie. And it's like, hey, babe, I'm coming home at 5:00. And, after a while.
Yeah. So, hey, babe, the goal is 5:00.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So it got to a point where my wife, she called me on it. She said, don't lie to me. You're lying to me. And I think that really hit home when she put it that way. I was like, I'm lying to my wife because I know I'm not going to be home anywhere around that time. Yeah. Because the truth is, there's just one more thing I want to do. There's just one more thing I want to get done. And so that's a basic example of facing truth, It's interesting how I was speaking to my unit today about this. I don't know why it came up, but I was talking about, fear and truth and it's interesting that as a man, as a Master Chief of 29 years, when I got my mask on, when I got my uniform on, I can sit there and I can talk to 1,000 people and I can bark orders and I can with confidence and I can just be that person that they're looking for. But I have a hard time of just facing my wife and telling her the truth sometimes because I'm afraid of, I don't know, being a fake or being a liar or, it's really interesting. And so battling through, that's one example of it. Another example is, being authentic as a person, right? I think one of the things that really hit home for me a couple years ago, there was a guy that I was developing this relationship in the Navy, peer in the Navy, and he was kind of going through some tough times, and we were having some deep conversations about life, death, and I just kind of happened to mention, like, yeah, I'm a Christian, and he literally said to me, he's like, really? He's like, I would have never guessed that, and I really took offense to that. I was like, what do you mean? Like, what? Like, and I'm like, and that really, really messed me up. And I was like, am I just this, am I, when I really thought about it, when I really examined it, sometimes I'm not authentic. I'm not real. Sometimes I'm maybe a little too PC, or maybe I sugarcoat things a little bit, or there's a balance of, you don't want to be a jerk, right? There's a balance of, you don't want to go too far over the edge, and you're just that guy who's always complaining or whatever, whatever. There's a balance. I get that, but sometimes I think I'm guilty of just not being truthful, not being authentic to who I am, and so I've wrestled with that in latter years, especially behind closed doors when I'm talking to people. As a command master chief, as a leader, you're in the back of your mind, oh, is someone going to complain about what I said? Is someone going to be offended? Yeah. I can't talk about religion in the workplace, or those are the things that you lie to yourself and you tell yourself. But the truth is, I found that it's actually not. It's not true. And I found that when I'm just real and authentic, and if I'm just, hey, I always shape it up. Hey, this is in my experience, or hey, this is what I believe, or hey, this is what I found in my life. And if I just kind of expose, hey, this is me. This is what I believe. This is what's worked in my life, and I've come to find that when I'm honest with people, it's really impactful. It really touches people, and people. I feel like I really connect with people that way. Versus, in the back of my mind, I'm afraid of what people think. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's just not facing the truth, man. Being fearful, man. It's just. Yeah.
Fearful. Fear's a great motivator. I don't mean great as in like awesome. I mean great as in like from a weight standpoint. But there's one thing that's better than fear, and that's hope. I think. At least I read it in a book somewhere.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that a little bit lately.
Yeah.
But good stuff. I got to pull out an old Johnny Cash quote, and that was, trust gets you killed, love gets you hurt, but being real gets you hated. Maybe on a mass scale, but like when you get into your cliques, your groups, your circles, the right people, sounds like the truth will set you free. Right.
Yeah. And sometimes the truth, and I've experienced this in my career. Sometimes when you finally tell people what they need to hear, what they really need to hear, and that's one of my jobs. One of my jobs as a command master chief, what the Navy pays me to do is it's called unsolicited feedback, is be truthful, tell it like it is. That's what the Navy pays me to tell it like it is, that's one of the first best advice I got from my CO before I went to be a command master chief like 6 years ago. He's like, hey, he told me on my outgoing interview, he said, hey, the biggest disservice you can do is not be honest. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, I think the first couple of years in my job, in my role, I wasn't honest. I was fearful, but when I started to learn to be honest, and that takes a lot of courage, man. It takes a lot of courage to tell.
Yeah, because there could be some personal cost to that, right?
And in my experience, there was. Some of the groups I was leading, they hated me. They didn't like me. I didn't make a lot of friends, and I wasn't favored. And some bosses I worked for didn't like me, and which caused for very challenging relationships and work environments, and which meant that I buried that stress, and it was a hard couple of years, man. It was facing truth, facing uh, those things, and saying the things that I really need to say because it needs to be said.
Yeah.
Um, man, it's hard, man.
Was there a light bulb that went off after those couple years, or an event?
Yeah, um, there was. Um, so I was kind of going through a really tough time. It was on a deployment, and I was kind of at an impasse with one of my bosses, and it just and rightfully so. It was a tough time. We're all just doing the best we can, and sometimes even when everybody does the best they can, it just doesn't work, right? And when I look back, um, some things need to be said by me, and I wasn't saying them, and I wasn't sticking up for people. I wasn't speaking truth when truth needed to be spoke, and I wasn't calling people on their stuff when people needed to be exposed, and it led to a lot of sleepless nights, and it led to me getting to a point of just deep depression, probably. I remember the turning point for me. I was laying in my rack on deployment and staring at my rack. It's like two in the morning, and I can't sleep. And I'm just going through the last conversation, going through the whole thing, what I said, what was said, what happened, and I just can't rest at 2 in the morning. And I knew right then, at that moment, I knew I was in trouble, and I knew I needed help. And so, you do like what you tell everybody else to do, like, hey, go see the chaplain, hey, go talk to this counselor, go get help. That's what you tell people to do, right? Sometimes we don't do that for ourselves, and I wasn't doing it for myself, and so I finally I went and talked to the chaplain, and I was fearful. I was afraid of letting all of it out because I was afraid of the repercussions. I was afraid I would get in trouble. I was afraid people would get in trouble. I was afraid I would get fired. I was afraid, the mission wouldn't get completed because I felt like by me being quiet, I was keeping everything together, and planes were still flying, and mission was still being accomplished because I was just not rocking the boat, basically. And
Yeah.
what I was doing, I was just running myself in the ground. And I remember this is I remember I was in the chaplain's office, and I start pouring it all out, like, and I'm saying, this guy did this guy did that, I'm venting about what somebody else is doing, and I'm doing this, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm pointing the fingers, right? And he listens to me, takes it all in. He says, okay. And he says, and this was my boss, and he says, well, I'm a Christian, I'm a professed Christian, and the chaplain knows this. We have a good relationship, and he asked me one question that rocked my world. He said to me, he says, well, have you prayed for him? And I was like, what? Somebody prayed for him? No. I mean, I don't like the guy. I had to pray for him.
Yeah.
And and he did what I call a Jedi mind trick on me. He said, "I tell you what."
I like this already.
Oh yeah, he said. He said, "I'll tell you what." He said, "Let's pray for him." So he said, "What's his name?" And I told him his name. I'm not going to say his name. And he writes his name on a piece of paper, and he drops the paper on the ground. He says, "Come on in. Let's pray." And comes in, pulls me in. We bow our heads and puts the paper on the ground, so we're both staring at it. He goes, "All right, you start first." And I was like, silence.
Yeah.
And he didn't say anything, and he wasn't letting me off the hook. He's like, come on, you know what to pray for. You know exactly what to pray for. Go ahead. Still silence.
Yeah.
And I was just like, man, what he was showing me is just how hard my heart was. Like, my heart was so hard against this one person. that I was blind. I couldn't even see past my own pride. I couldn't even see past, my own shortfalls. All I could do was point fingers, right? And so I remember just staring at this piece of paper, and it just seemed like forever. And and
it's hard, right? Because pointing fingers is an easy way, right?
So he pushed me, encouraged me, and he didn't pray. He just waited. And so I started praying, and I started praying for him. And when I pray for him, man, it's just like I let go, man.
Yeah, weight was lifted, maybe.
Gosh, man, I'm being honest, man. I cried like a baby in there, man. But I kept praying, and because I knew what to pray for. I knew exactly what to pray for. But my heart was so hard. And here I am, like, hey, I'm a Christian. I believe this. I believe that. But
yeah, you're also human, though.
True, absolutely. So it just poured out of me, man. And yeah, weight was lifted off of me, and I walked out of there. I was like, oh my gosh. And it changed my perspective. But the funny thing is, it didn't change anything. Like, the circumstances didn't change. What changed was me, which was the most important thing. And my heart that was hard was softened. And it changed how I looked at things, and it changed how I interacted with my boss and with my people, and which, man, I had to humble myself a lot. I had to eat some gravel. I had to, I had to be the leader that I wasn't being, and nothing changed, and that individual ended up leaving, and it got a little bit better once leadership changed, but a lot of that stuff was still there, and some of that stuff takes a while to get out. And deployment doesn't help. COVID doesn't help. But some of that stuff really carried on, that those scars are there, man. But most importantly, I think, to your question, like, that was a pivotal moment for me, and me as a man, as a leader, as a realizing that if you harden your heart, man, and you can't, you let that pride set in, man, it blinds you, man.
Yeah. Brought it up on a couple of episodes so far, but it's okay to look back. Don't stare. It's that look back stare is a problem, right? Can really mess you up, for sure.
Yeah.
Been there as well. Let's see. I'll cut this part out. You got me. You got in my OODA loop. It's good stuff. I guess anything else within your career that you wanted to share before I ask you what your price of admission is?
I'm going to share two things about you that I remember, and you brought it up, and it ties in perfect. No, it ties in perfect to what I was talking about. So, going back to the Naval Academy, people were really, I don't think people were really happy I picked you as a company commander.
Imagine that.
Yeah. I mean, there were reasons, I had different reasons. One of the reasons was you were an outlier. I wanted an outlier. But there's two moments that you and I had that I never forget, and it stuck with me. It was truth. It was honesty. And the first time was, I don't know if you remember that. I think you were a junior or a sophomore. Something happened at Paramount King's Dominion, or it was.
Yeah, I got in trouble.
You got in trouble, right?
Yep.
So word got back to me, and I came to you. I came to your room I came looking for you because I got the nasty note, right? And I got told to handle it, and so I came looking for you. Walked down six hall, and it was actually, I think you were at the time, you were down to like 6-1, so I had to walk far. I knocked on the door, and you were there, and you answered, And I was like, what happened? Tell me what happened. What the heck? Um, and I think, was it like underage drinking or something?
Yeah, it was a buddy of mine, Andy Lark, and I were. Well, it was a big group of us, like you talked about in
Yeah.
the beginning. No PFC.
And I,
Big group of us. I bought it, the alcohol, and it was like early in the morning before we go to Busch Gardens, is what it was.
yeah.
And
So yeah, go ahead.
yeah, he ends up getting
He got
belligerent,
caught.
arrested.
Yep.
He
He
got
got
arrested,
arrested. Yep.
and I was his buddy.
Yep. So it came back to me, and I remember going to your room and asking you, and you told me. You told me what happened. And I remember thinking to myself, is he telling the truth? Because it was kind of like you just told me, but I remember looking at you, and I remember looking in your eyes, and it was sincere. I got this feeling of sincerity, and I think it just dropped after that. I didn't really do anything. I didn't pursue it. I just was like, okay, all
I
right,
went through all the boards, got in trouble, got my sentence
yeah,
for summer, and yeah.
yeah. So, but I remember that, right? You were just honest with me, and that stuck with me, man. That really, really stuck with me. That was I think that was our first real interaction. And then I think it might have been your senior year. You got in trouble for missing class, or I got a nastygram from one of your professors, and they reached out to me, and I need your help. This football player, Tony Haber, keeps missing my class, or something like that. I need you to look into it. Blah 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 blah. And I was like, and that was pretty customary. I would get those notes from professors, and I would interject on behalf of the professor, like as a parent, right? So I remember I called you in my office, and you came and talked to me, and I think I pulled it up in mids, and I was like, what's up with all this stuff? Why are you missing all these classes? And I remember your response. I couldn't believe it. It shocked me. Do you remember what you told me?
I don't. No, I'm interested.
You said to me, you said, Senior Chief, that's the only time I can shit. You said,
Nice.
that's the time I have to go, and that's the only time I can go. And my schedule is so busy with football and class and all these things. That's the only time, and that's when I go. So I'm sorry. And you told me that's the only time I can go. And
That's great.
at first, your answer, I was kind of like, huh? But then going back to like, I remember like just the sincerity, your honesty. Like you didn't balk. You just told me the truth. And I was just like, and it really caught me off guard, but it wasn't the first time. And so I tell you, like that stuck with me, man. That all that equated to your character, your credibility, your trustworthiness. So like when I thought of, should I make Tony Haber the company commander? I was like, absolutely. Like it was easy. I was like you proved to me, you can be a football player, you can go to school, but when things don't go right, you can just be honest about it, because that's life, right? Sometimes things don't go right, and sometimes we make mistakes, and sometimes we come up short. But if you own it and just be honest, we just move on, and that's kind of what we did. I remember in both cases, we just moved on, and
Yeah.
it wasn't a big deal, and that's so. I share that with you and with this group because that's something that where you really made it easy for me to pick you as a company commander because of you and that honesty in those situations. And yeah, man, I don't regret it.
Man, those are good memories. Thanks for bringing up that second one. I'd never, I don't remember that, but it's,
Yeah.
I wish I could go back and try and remember that one. Good stuff. All right. Price of admission. How would you summarize it?
I've thought a lot about this. And I'm like, okay, price admission to what? Price to what? What am I trying to get into? I try to think about it, and nerded out. But you know, I think it's like I told you, man. It's truthfulness, man. Truth. And there's definitely, when I look back in my life, there's things I've come up short in my life and different areas of my life. And I look back, and a lot of it was just me not being honest, man. Me not being honest with myself, me not being honest with those around me that I love. Because sometimes the truth hurts, man. And sometimes delivering the truth hurts because you know it hurts. So you don't want to do it. You don't want to say it. You don't want to watch people go through it. But the truth, but the reality is they want that from you. They want the truth. They want to hear it. They want to be corrected or disciplined or pulled back in, and they're just like, they're just earning for it, and you refuse to give it. And so there's times in my life and my marriage and my professional life that I wasn't honest, man. I wasn't truthful, and I tell guys all this time, man, it's lying, which is the opposite of truthfulness. You know, most folks will say, the way it works is I ask guys, what does it mean to lie? And most answers I get from men are, well, it's when I don't tell the truth. Okay, Captain Obvious, you're right. But is that it? And most guys never come up with the other part. So the other part of lying is omitting the truth, right? So when we admit truths, or when we admit parts of truths, or certain details of truth, that's still lying. And so we're not being truthful. So I'm guilty of that, man. I'm guilty of omitting certain parts to make people maybe feel better, or maybe to not rock the boat, or I'm fearful what people will think about me. And so I think I've come up short, man. So my price of admission is truthfulness, man. And if I want to continue to do good things, man, I got to learn to be honest, man. I got to learn to be truthful, and not worry about what people are going to say, not worry about it, Let it just fall the way it's going to fall.
Absolutely. 100%. Awesome. What'd you learn today?
It wasn't that bad.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I like to hear that.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, I got a few that are on the fence still, so I hope they listen to this. And forgive me for not knowing this, because you always know mine. What's your wife's name?
Candace.
Tell Candace, thank you for your time tonight. And then you got a couple kiddos, right?
I do. I got 4. I've got
4.
Goodness. So there were 2 kids I had that were always around the hall back then. They were at the time they were like 10 and 6, I think. Now they're 24 and 22. One's a school teacher, and one just finished school, and they're doing great. One's married.
Awesome.
I was married before I got divorced and remarried. And my wife Candace and I, we have 2 girls together, almost 10 and almost 6. And so we're here in Italy.
Awesome. They'll definitely be cultured kids, which is they won't realize it for a while, but provides a lot of value. So
absolutely, man.
Good stuff. Well,
good talk.
I'll let you go. Appreciate the talk today, and it was awesome. It was great.
It was, man. It's good seeing you. Good talking to you. Thanks for staying connected over the years, man. I really enjoy it.
100%. Right back at you.
All right, brother.